Good morning, everybody. It is May 27th, and we're up to 39. Tomorrow,
Woohoo!
Lord willing, it'll be 40, which is
the big 4-0.
Yes.
Yeah.
40 is a good number.
Yes. Yeah, we're probably up to, several hundred billion in exponential numbers in our special COVID numbers.
I can't even. Now we're dealing in abstractions. I can't even fathom that.
I know. It's a big number.
So, for those who don't know us, I am Mark Van Steenwyk. I'm the director for the Center for Prophetic Imagination.
And I'm Daniel Wolpert. I direct MICA, the Minnesota Institute of Contemplation and Healing.
Today, we're talking about letting the old die. That's basically, and other people, but that's usually how the rhetoric goes, is we need to get back to normal, and the old are going to die soon anyway.
So first of all, context. Context is everything, right? So today's COVID numbers, just to put all this in perspective. So today, the U.S. is going to pass 100,000 dead, and and one of the interesting points of reference and measurement is measuring the U.S. COVID experience versus the South Korean COVID experience, because they had their first confirmed case on the same day, probably not their first actual case, but their first confirmed case.
Mm-hmm.
And also, South Korea is a liberal democracy, right, like us, so similar kind of government. We can't blame it on the communists, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so in population adjusted terms, as of today, South Korea would have 1,678 deaths. So contrary to what our great president is always saying, we're not doing a very good job. Right. And part of what we need at this point, we being the country, the dominant narrative, the systems of power, part of what we need is a cover story.
Mm-hmm.
So we need a cover story, and we need a narrative that tells us that this is all okay.
Yeah.
And so one of the big ones that we're seeing, and again, this is not just a bunch of yahoos on some website, right? I mean, Forbes had a huge article on this a couple days ago. The Washington Post. I mean, there's a very conscious media press on this, and the narrative is, hey, it's okay, only people in nursing homes die. And so, it's okay for the rest of us to get back out. So first of all, this is not true. I mean, that's one of the things that's really important to realize. So, for example, in New York State, which has had the most COVID deaths of any state, I think they're getting up to 30,000.
Mm-hmm.
Only 16% of those deaths are in nursing homes. So, the place with the most deaths, a relatively small minority of those are in nursing homes.
Mm-hmm.
And even nationwide, it's under 50% overall. So, so that's like, well, only 56,000 people who have died are not in nursing homes. That makes it sound a lot better, I guess.
Oh. Well, there's so many layers to this. To me, it's, when we talked about, a number of broadcasts ago about how we simultaneously avoid death and welcome it in different ways in our society. So we can't deal with death, but at the same time, like, if the old people die, it's okay.
Right.
And it's like there's a warped logic to this. It's not the sort of like welcoming a good death sort of thing that I think maybe every healthy culture has. But at the same time, it's just all convoluted and messed up.
Right.
So in this case, the willingness to, yes, people that are old are going to die quicker than people who are young. That's logically
Right.
generally
That is
true.
true. That is a statistical fact.
And it's also true that I don't think we should take heroic methods just to prolong our lives indefinitely. That's also true.
Mm-hmm.
But the cavalier willingness to let old people die because they're going to die anyway is just too close to Nazism to me. Like, I don't know how else to. I know I just broke Godwin's law or whatever, but it's just, there's a level of cruelty to that. Even if it were true that 100,000 of the people who died were all nursing home people, it's just cruel and demonic.
Well, right. Yeah. Well, and again, and this is why, I wanted to start off with those numbers from South Korea. What it is masking, right? I mean, the fact that now becomes the conversation, what it is masking is the massive failure of our government and public health system to deal with this. Right. So it's sort of like, well, oops, we couldn't stop the virus, but hey, it just got into nursing homes and killed old people. Like, okay, so it wasn't that big of a screw up.
Yeah.
We
were waiting for them to die anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, and look, it would not surprise me at all if in some back room in Washington, they're going, hey, look, this is going to save a lot of Medicare dollars. Right? Because we're not going to be paying for a lot of those folks in nursing homes. So it's not such a bad thing overall. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then, of course, the other thing, right, is that it completely ignores all of the ancillary issues related to how are we protecting workers? How did the virus get into these nursing homes? Who else are these folks bringing the virus to? And again, since the narrative is not true to begin with, it is simply distracting from the fact that, oh yeah, no, actually, we've got now literally millions of other people either dead or with very significant levels of illness, who are experiencing that as a result of how we've dealt with this. Mm-hmm. Right. And, but yeah, as you said, there's, maybe you could say some more about this. I mean, you mentioned eugenics the other day when we were talking about this, but, there's a long history of this kind of thinking in our country.
Yeah. Eugenics, it's basically the idea that, in some ways, you could say it's based off of a warped understanding of Darwinism, but it doesn't have to be from that root. But this idea that if we want to have a strong people, strong culture, strong society, strong race, whatever, that you need to cull the herd of the unwanted traits. And that can come from like getting rid of old people because they're a drain on our society. They take away too much resources and our focus. That's a kind of a eugenic kind of logic. Or, and sterilizing people who are developmentally disabled. That's another eugenic sort of logic. Killing off homosexuals, that's been part of the conversation about eugenics, so that undesirable trait doesn't pass on. It's just basically, let's get rid of something that is a drain, that's a distraction or a problem. And so I feel like America has always functioned this way. Like, we've always had undesirables who we feel like we should just get rid of in order to make us a stronger people. And in this case, the elderly get our sympathy, but they don't usually get our respect. Right. So we put up with them as if we have a sentimental attachment. But if we don't have that, then we just say, well, they're kind of a drain anyway. They cost taxpayer money for Medicaid. They're distracting kids who should be able to go and work and have their own lives, that kind of logic. All these sorts of things. So when this happens and like you see, oh, those are the people who are dying, that's okay. They're the disposable people. Or, even with the high rates among African-American community, there's also kind of a eugenic logic there too. It's like, those are the people who they're always doing stuff to each other and getting sick and dying or whatever, killing each other. It's okay if they get it. Like, there's that kind of like twisted supremacist logic that's undergirding all of this.
Right. Well, and again, this is an American thread, but this is also a particularly triumphalist Christian thread,
Yes.
right? So again, it's the whole like hashtag blessed, right? Like,
Yeah.
if I'm a good person, God bestows favor on me. I mean, this is the whole basis of the prosperity gospel. Um, but Christian supremacy, right? So the kings of Italy and Spain can divide up the world and say, you get this half, you get this half. We're the superior people, and we will just get rid of whoever stands in our way.
Yeah, that's right. We've got some comments starting to come in.
Starting to come in.
Yeah, it's good. Get them in now. It's better when they get in now.
Right.
Kathleen writes, this goes back to the idea of people get what they deserve. So we should talk about that. Also, I hear people say you die when God wills it.
Right. Yeah. So people get what they deserve.
It's parts of, this is how, because we have this myth that we're a meritocracy, we always have to justify when bad things happen, we somehow make it seem about it being deserved. So a great example, it's harder to use that logic for elderly people, but it's the logic we use all the time when bad things happen to ethnic minorities in this country, like African American people, Latino community, that if violence breaks out, or in this recent murder from a police officer, it's like, well, he shouldn't have resisted. So if some guy dies and it's really shouldn't have happened, there's still a way to just do mental gymnastics to say they had it coming, they deserved it. And it's almost always tied in like with oppression as a way of justifying oppression.
All right. So Maria's got a good comment here.
Maria writes, nursing homes are a symbol to me of the family breakdown. My family has a tradition of caring for our elders in our home, but nursing homes become necessary in a culture where careers take priority. I have since seen the value of nursing homes when the medical needs become too overwhelming.
Right. Yeah. So this, I mean, to me, Maria, this gets into not just the family breaking down, but this whole issue of how do you care for people in culture, right? And does care get prioritized? Right. And so, when care, right. So for so long, I mean, even when we had this, quote, traditional family, which we sort of never really had, but anyway, that's another conversation. But, the notion that women just worked in the home or women didn't work, right? There's this long narrative of, well, care doesn't have this monetary value to it. And so, so then it's not valued in society, it's degraded. And, Mark, as you said, the elders don't have value. So caring for them doesn't really have much value because they're just sort of like sitting there, and so then, you've got to sort of monetize care. You've got to somehow figure out how to do the caregiving thing. You get people convinced that that's not a valuable thing to engage in. And then all of that kind of snowballs and leads to this sort of institutionalization, which, I mean, it sometimes can have value and things like that. But when it's put into a capitalist system, it just becomes another one of these, machine cog things going on.
Well, and it'd be nice if it was just people ended up in a nursing home because their children were selfish. I mean, that'd be nice if that were the only reason, but it's almost impossible now in our society to not have both adults in a household work because it's become so systemic.
Yep.
And then we act like Medicare and Social Security are like little perks instead of absolute necessities. So that they don't provide enough to care for someone. So right. So then you're kind of forced to warehouse them in these nursing homes because it's the only cost-effective way of care. And it's just, we're forced into this because of a twisted system that people, even if they don't want to go that way, they feel coerced. They feel coerced to putting their parents in an old folks home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Ceres has a good comment here.
She writes, Western culture often wants to portray that epidemics and pandemics are a mystery to overthink, yet many are really incompetent projecting that onto marginalized folks, like through eugenics. So,
yeah.
It,
Yeah, I mean, to me, and I know that I've mentioned this before, we've talked about this before on here. I mean, to me, what we're seeing more than anything else is gross incompetence. I mean, it's sort of this, driven by all kinds of, the problems and the issues that we've been talking about. But the incompetence piece has got to be front and center in all of this. And again, one of the things about this global pandemic is that, it's like this great sort of social science experiment. Like, we have other cultures, we have other examples. We can't just say, oh, in theory, you could do it differently or you could do it better because it's only happening to us. No, it's like we actually have real life examples, and we're like, it's not like South Korea doesn't have old people. Right? I mean, it's not like South Korea doesn't have nursing homes. They do, and they have old people. They actually have lots of old people, and they don't have 50,000, 60,000 dead old people, and they're just going, oh, that's too bad. All the old people died. Like, that's not happening there. So again, this kind of narrative and this sense of, oh, this is okay, or it's not that bad, is just ridiculous. Kathleen has a nice comment about.
I have sat with persons who were comatose and felt blessed by the experience. It changed my perspective of who has value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's another huge piece to this, right? Is how do we deal and relate to elders? And of course, again, and this is, as we were saying at the beginning, this convoluted, weird, death avoidance thing is very much connected to this issue of how do we view old age. And many traditional societies where people die well, they also have. All right, I'm laughing at Catherine's comment.
Dan, do other countries really exist?
Right, that could be the next conspiracy theory. Other countries actually don't exist.
They're made up by liberals.
And robot birds. Maybe they're just robot countries. Okay, Catherine, you derailed me. Good job. Yeah, so this is the paradox, right? Other cultures where people die well are also often cultures where elders are respected. Right? And so that elders are valued for their wisdom, for their insight, for the love and caring that flows out of them. And that culture then also has a sense of it's important to die well, because of course people that you respect and feel good about, you would want them to die well, right? Not die poorly. People that you don't care about, you don't care whether they die well or die poorly. And it's the sooner the better.
Wynn writes, we moved my mother-in-law, who has Alzheimer's, back to Vietnam to, one, live with family, and two, nursing homes are so costly here.
Right.
It's, I don't want to come off harsh. Like, I think there are good reasons to have move people into nursing homes, especially because of things like specialized care. Like Alzheimer's is a great example where maybe you need there's some assistance that's provided. So it's not like it's that nursing homes should cease to exist. And this is an example, like, okay, so it's expensive. Our society doesn't value them. So then you're left having to, it even increases the need for you to work. So it puts you in a bind to where you have to work more to put them in nursing home to provide less care than they would maybe otherwise get. And this is all, and again, because of how our society works, we're told that the fact that they get anything like Social Security, they should be grateful for whatever little they get.
Right.
It's like saying, You're only valuable to the society as long as you can provide tax revenue through your work.
Right.
We assume that that's normal, and that's not normal. That's not the way. Every civilization hasn't always worked that way.
Right. Right. Yeah. And, and that's such an important thing to keep repeating, right? Because normal is always just in reference to our experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it's hard to imagine like, oh, there's another way to do this. And again, it's interesting in terms of the pandemic, when you bring up these mythical other countries of which I speak, it's fascinating, the mental gymnastics that Americans go through that I hear all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's, oh, well, they only do that because there's fewer people, or they only do that because they have this horrible government, or they only do that, because, somehow they're not free, or, it's like we do all this weird stuff to try to push at bay what is actually going on around us. And, as I said, now we've got this incredibly horrible, toxic narrative of like, well, it's actually fine because it's just the old people in nursing homes who are dying. Which again, on so many levels is so painful and crazy, right? Because it is just one step after that to just saying, okay, well, fine. Why don't we just kill all the people in nursing homes? Like, why don't we actively give them COVID, right? I mean, that's the eugenics thing taken to the total Nazi degree, right? It's like, well, let's just actively get rid of them.
Well, and just to add more fuel to the fire, Nazis didn't just kill people because they thought they were hateful about it. Like, they thought they were being kind. And I've also heard that used.
Right.
So like most evil fuckers don't really think they're being evil in the moment, right? So right now, it's like we have to take a step back and say like, well, if you're, to me, my operative definition of evil is when someone takes pleasure at the suffering or destruction of another. And so you can individualize it by saying, well, I'm so glad that person is suffering. I want them to suffer. But societally, when we start making an argument that it's to our best interest and we can enjoy life better if these other people die, that's by definition evil, the way at least I, maybe and a lot of other people use the word evil. Right. So we have to stop and think, like, what is it about? Why are we so eager to let these people die, and for what purpose? Like, maybe instead of assuming capitalist logic makes any damn sense, we should take a step back and say, what if we could have a society where life is valued and that your value isn't determined by your productivity and all these sorts of things, these capitalist logic. And of course, the reason why media and everybody like pitches these stories is because even at an instinctive level, they know that if you start poking enough, it can all unravel. Mm-hmm. And so if there's a lot of vested interest in concealing this, as Dan's been pointing out, like there's reasons why we can't be like Korea. There's reasons why we can't be doing what other nations do.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, and then of course the other layer to this where the incredible lack of caring and compassion comes in, right, is that it's not considering at all the healthcare workers that are involved with all of this, right?
Yeah.
Who also now are totally invisible. I mean, that's the other thing about any kind of warehousing or institutionalization is that everything becomes invisible to the wider society. And so, the people who are in these settings who are dealing with this situation, I mean, they're going to be traumatized for life. And to just sort of go, oh, well, this is no big deal. It's just nursing homes. And, oh, yeah, we should protect them and take measures. But, that's not so bad. I mean, there was a guy that owns a bar up in Duluth that just wrote this huge op-ed thing in the Duluth Times last week. And this was his whole deal. He's like, and he literally said, I'm not going to get this. My chance of dying from this, or my customer's chance of dying from this, is basically the same as being hit by lightning. It's just people in nursing homes who are dying, and I'm opening my fucking bar. I don't care what the governor says. Right? It's like, okay, yeah. I mean, that's the level of lack of compassion.
This is a great
Yes.
comment. Sardis says, how do we challenge the narrative of pro-lifers in light of the disposability politics?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, the way we begin to challenge it, I think, is that, pro-lifers, which of course is this term connected to abortion. I mean, they are not pro-life. They are just anti-abortion. And there's nothing about about life that they're interested in, because as soon as that kid is born, they don't care about them at all. And especially if they're a kid of color or they're poor or something, now they're just this horrible mooch off of the system. Yeah. So I think we need to just be very clear that pro-life folks are not really all that interested in life.
I mean, there are the consistently pro-life crew. Like, to me, like a great example would be like Dan Berrigan, who was an anti-war. He was pro-life, but like, they're rare. They're like unicorns. Because that's not the driving mechanism of this abortion debate. They're anti-women having sex. They're anti all kinds of things. And I share this story all the time. So Amy and I tried to have children for years before Jonas was born, and we were looking into adoption. And so I thought, and at the time I was pro-life. So I thought, evangelicals, we're all about this. So I bet you there's all sorts of churches and organizations that give adoption assistance. No, there are not.
No.
And to me, when I realized that, I'm like, these people this isn't pro-life. We just don't like people having abortions, and we don't like the kind of people who end up having abortions. Like, there's like this other thing, and the pro-life label is like a veneer over it all. So of course, you bring up like, Afghani children don't count. And like, once you leave the womb, if you're poor, you don't count. And old people don't count. Right. It's like, to me, there's either one of two tactics. You can either expose the deception involved, or you can say, if you assume that the person really somehow deep down inside has some sort of pro-life ethic, challenge them. But I've hardly ever seen anyone shift their thinking on this stuff. No, I did, because I saw the hypocrisy of it and started wanting to be more consistent in my ethics. But
so are you saying you're a unicorn?
I'm not I would consider myself something like pro-choice now, but I do know that there are good pro-life people out there who are consistent, even if I don't agree with how they slice and dice the abortion issue.
Yeah, I was mostly making a joke there. I was trying. I failed. All right, Catherine's got a comment here.
I still love you, Dan. Catherine writes, so weird how to remember Trump campaigners who would rant about how liberals want to euthanize old people. Oh my God, I forgot about that.
That's right.
Death panels. Sure.
The death panels. Yes.
Oh my God.
The death panels of Obamacare, right? The terrible liberals, who are just going to deny care to people. Well, the GOP figured that shit out. Just kill them all in advance, and we don't have to have a panel. Maybe that's what they would say. Well, we don't have a panel. We just kill them. That's better, I guess.
Yeah, it's because it's the invisible hand choking them out,
That's right. The invisible hand of God. All right.
Maria writes, the arguments I have heard try to put it as a win-lose situation where my survival is dependent on an open economy. People are so afraid that they can't reimagine doing business any other way. They have trouble admitting their lack of faith that God can provide.
Yeah. Well, right. I mean, yes, exactly. I mean, this whole thing has been cast in this duality of open economy versus taking care of people versus preventing, and people will say that. It's like, well, I mean, these old people are going to die. And if we don't have an open economy, then everybody else will die. So we have to have an open economy. And yeah, some of them will die. It'll be sad. And again, I think that's why pointing to these other fake countries is so important, because we actually have evidence that duality is completely wrong. Right? I mean, you know, and it's not just South Korea. I have a friend in Malaysia. She's been living in Malaysia. There, she's functioning normal. She goes out, she does all this stuff. They've got all these temperature checks, all these public health things they've been doing. They have not had a case in her city now in almost a month, right? Plenty of old people, plenty, you know, there's all kinds of folks. There's an economy, things are happening. So yes, we've been told that this is this dualistic thing that we have to choose. And that is simply not true. And I think we need to just keep saying that over and over again, because that is the dominant narrative that's being pushed on us.
Mm-hmm. We're well past time. We can keep talking about this.
Yeah,
because I love dumping on America, American governance,
yes.
And our business sector. But yeah. We're done for today. Thanks for all the comments.
Yep. Yeah, we really appreciate it, and we're looking to line up a couple new guests. We don't have the exact dates yet, but we're excited about that. And as always, thanks for being here and listening and sharing and commenting and joking with us. And we'll see you later.
And love your elders.
And love your elders. Yeah.